Hi everyone and welcome along to Sonic Academy with me, Chris. Today I have the pleasure of chatting to a producer who has released over 30 productions since 2008. He was named by Beatport as one of their progressive house artists of 2009 and has remixed everybody from Oliver Lieb to John Digweed. He is also a label owner and he is also a mastering engineer. Please welcome to Sonic Academy, Cid Inc's main man, Henri. Hi Henri, you there?
Thanks, Chris. I'm fine. And you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us on Sonic Academy today. As we talked off air, and you know by now, I'm a bit of a fanboy of your work. It's just right up my street. Your Cid Inc collection volume 2, we just relaunched the website a few weeks ago and got me through lots of long hours of laborious retagging of videos and stuff. Tell me, is this a sort of a approach you like on the album format where it's a collection of songs? You haven't done an album, is that correct?
I've always been kind of scared to make an album because I've always felt like it should need to be something special, but the collection volume 2 was kind of an idea from Mitch on Microcastle label, and he just wanted to collect his favorite tracks on there, and then I decided actually to make a few like exclusive tracks because it has, I think it was five unreleased tracks on there as well. But I don't know which one I prefer. I think actually I'm producing a mini album at the moment, so we'll see how it comes, if it comes.
Yeah, there's a lot of producers that I don't know where the album format is at the moment because everything changes so quickly, you know, and you put nearly a year, sometimes 18 months work into this body of work, and within 2-3 weeks it can be gone. It's a real conundrum. Do you struggle with that?
Yeah, I mean, albums are not like they used to be. Yeah. It's not. I mean, yeah.
Okay, let's go back to. I think you were born in Finland, grew up in Sweden. Did you spend your teenage years in Sweden going to the acid house, or was that back in Finland?
Did I go to? Excuse me.
Acid house parties.
Oh yeah. It was actually both because I grew up at the border of in Sweden, but at the border, like close to the border of Finland.
Yeah.
So I went to parties in both countries actually.
And what year was this? And who were the kind of main DJs that were influencing you at the time, or what was the sound at the time?
This was like way over 20 years ago, so it was the rave scene.
Yeah.
Back then, with Carl Cox and all those, you know, and Prodigy, of course, and like 25 years ago or something like that. So yeah, and lots of hardcore acts from the Dutch. Hardcore acts, like, yeah.
And so what was it got you into then the production? How did you go from being a sort of raver in northern Finland, Sweden, into going, right, this is what I want to do, you know?
I actually started first as a producer. I started like making music in, I think it was 88, 89, something like that.
Okay, right, wow.
Because one of my friends introduced me to a music program. On Amiga Tracker, a tracker program.
Yeah.
So I was totally hooked straight from the start, and I didn't do any like club music back then. It was more like just music.
Right. Okay.
But then eventually, around at the same time, I got into club music and the rave music. So from there it started slowly. Actually, I did my first club track first in maybe 95, something like that.
And what was your sound back in 95? You like most producers who start off making furious, either hardcore or jungle, and then as they get older they get slower. What was your sort of first production?
Hardcore,
yes.
Yeah, because for everything from hardcore, I went to like psytrance.
Yeah.
In 98, something like that, trance, and then it ended up more house in 2000 and slower, yeah.
I think just as we get older, we just get slower and slower.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, you want to slow everything down. So, was there a pivotal moment in your career that, you know, you thought, right, this is it, or has it just been this, slow 20 years of just growing and growing and then moving? And how would you describe your career?
Well, the first real release was in 2004. I had a project called Mastronic with a German guy, and we actually released on 2005, I think it was. We made the remix for John Digweed, and we had quite a few releases on Bedrock as well.
Yeah.
And Global Underground and such. So I think somewhere actually, like 10 years ago, I felt like this is could be something.
Yeah, this is happening. This is it. This is cool. And how did you? What I'm curious about is I went and looked up where you live, and it's very north, Finland, Sweden. How does a young producer in a very remote part of Northern Europe become? How does he get his music out there for and get exposure?
Well, I think it's hard everywhere because nowadays, especially because it's so. Yeah, there's so many producers around. Yeah. But I think you need to have the passion and just try as much as you can and try to get your music out there, and eventually I think it will work out.
And what do you do? Do you just track down email addresses and ping people links, or SoundCloud, or how do you? What's the actual mechanics of really? How would you approach it now? If you were a young producer, what steps would you take?
I would probably try to just mail around to DJs. SoundCloud links, for example, that's the best option, in my opinion, actually, and the easiest one. And try to get in touch with people that you admire. Maybe it can be really hard, but you never know. It could be worth the effort, actually.
Have you found it a very frustrating experience? Is it getting more frustrating trying to, because there is so much more noise out there and trying to, really rise above everybody else? Or was it harder back in the sort of pre-marketing, pre-social media days?
It was quite different. So, like when I had the first release, I actually put lots of stuff online. There was 15 years ago, there was already in Sweden, there was a platform that I can't remember the name of, but you could put your tracks on there, and there was like AR people listening to it. So I got attention slowly from that one. I don't know if you remember Inkfish.
No, I don't.
Oh no, from Sweden, the progressive act. They were on there as well, like working like on A&R. So they got in touch with me. I didn't even know what progressive music was back then, actually. So they say, do you have more, this type of progressive sound or anything laying around? And that's how it started slowly, like coming. So I think it's probably a bit easier if you know your way how to go with the social media and stuff now, but like I said, there's so many producers that it can get really
You're probably like me. I mean, I started producing back early 90s and stuff, and I suppose I struggled with that changeover from record company to poster campaigns to social media. And is it something you struggled with or embraced? It sounds like you embraced it with putting stuff online and quite happily diving into that side.
It's come naturally, kind of. I've been following all this, everything. I've been on SoundCloud since the start, and I've been using all the platforms basically straight from the beginning when they launched, and so I've gotten used to it by time.
You're quite comfortable in that world. So let's talk about your setup. Have you amassed a lot of stuff over the last 20 years, or have you got a very simple basic setup that just allows you to really work quickly and get stuff out?
I've always been, when it comes to production, I've always been a software guy.
Right.
Because I started with software on the Amiga computer, and I actually had a synth back in 20 years ago, something like that. But eventually I sold it because the plug-in market started to grow, and I noticed I can work really good with them. So Yeah, but I mean, I would like to maybe probably get the hardware synthesizer or two now, because I really love their sound. So we'll see. And it's easy to integrate with a DAW nowadays as well.
I suppose that's a very good point. I suppose 5 years, 7 years ago, it was a lot more difficult to bring these two sides of the worlds together, and now it's become,
exactly.
Audio cards now have this in mind, so you can quickly plug and play. You obviously are very prolific and get work very quickly. So do you have a standard template and setup that you go for, or is it always start afresh and scrap about and see what happens, or do you start with a process?
I'm not always that quick. Sometimes when for example doing a remix, it might take 2 months, because I start all over again for some. If it's something that even if it's a small thing that doesn't sound good to me, I usually tend to start over straight away.
Right.
But no, I don't have a template. I usually start with a bass line and kick, and that's it, and build everything around it when it comes to my own production, for example.
I'm going to take an educated guess here at what DAW you use. Because you're back old school, I'd say, are you Cubase?
No. Live.
What?
Live.
And what have you always used live, or you obviously used something prior to live?
I used to tracker programs.
Right.
Because it started with Amiga and the trackers, 4-channel tracker program.
Yeah.
And I continued to use trackers until 2005, actually.
Right. Okay.
And then the last few years I used a program called Bus Tracker. It's a modular-based kind of where you can connect things all over the place. But then when I started using live as a tool to play out as well, I moved kind of automatically to live, because it's so fast work then. Yeah.
And let's get down to sort of brass tacks about your productions, your grooves, your sound selection, the way you put stuff together just fascinates me. So, do you use loops? Is it all one shots? Do you have several kits that are Cid Inc kits, or how do you let's talk about drums first. How do you program and process your drums?
I have a few, I use the machine quite a lot for drums.
Right. When you say use machine, are you programming on pads to get grooves, or are you using?
No, I'm programming with mouse.
With mouse, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's the same and then I use in live. I use the drum rack quite a lot. But I have a collection of sounds that I like, bass drums and such, that I like to use in most of the productions. But when it comes to drums, it's I have always quite hard time with the kick. Actually, I don't compress like a sample with the compressor usually, but I EQ a lot, and I can go through. I suppose it's a problem for many producers, but I just can go through like hundreds of kicks before I'm satisfied with the sound.
Well, we may have a solution for you in the form of...
Yeah, I heard about it.
I'll get you a copy. We just released a beta there over the weekend, so we'll get you a copy over, and you can try it out. And I think it'll solve all your problems, because people. Okay, the big thing is people come back and go, we don't need our kick sample folders anymore. This just does it all for us.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
So, do you use loops? I mean, there's lots of sort of percussion-y elements and stuff in there. Are they all single shots samples, or are you using loops?
It depends a bit. I use some loops, but like lots of shakers and stuff. Yeah. The real shaker loops.
Yeah.
But it depends a bit. I usually program everything by myself.
Okay. And what sort of groove are you applying to all this? Is it imitating Logic C, or is it just a bit of swing in?
A bit swing.
Yeah. And that's you just everything just gels and grooves together. Is it the same swing every time, or is it different?
It's different. Like some percussions might have a swing, and then maybe hi-hats not, and it depends. I try out usually things and see how they sound together, like different swings, for example. Yeah,
different swings in between the percussions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an interesting concept.
But it's hard. Sometimes it works, sometimes not.
Yeah. No. And so is it? Are you literally adjusting things and just listening and going, this isn't working. This is okay, cool. Sounds really interesting. What processing would you use on drums? Have you got a processing chain, like a drum bus setup that you would always, what sort of compressor would you use, or reverb, or bit crushers, or distortions, or?
I don't usually process the kick or the drums at all, actually.
No.
Maybe some reverb, but it's usually live zone reverb I use. And some delays, maybe some here and there, but it's Live's own filter delay that I use there. So
I think this is an important lesson, and when we talk to a lot of producers, I used to just produce with Logic's own synths, and I would have friends with hard drives full of plugins. I was going, I want to know one or two really, really well, and I think if you have a decent reverb, long, short, and a decent delay, and a couple of distortions. Mm-hmm. That's all you need, and a compressor. You can really make everything sing. So, sure. Your drums are all sort of mainly single shots, but a few loops chopped and thrown in there. Not a lot of processing. There's a lot of atmosphere to your stuff, and it's one thing I love about production, but really struggle with. How do you get atmospheres going? Those sort of spacey loops that are just sort of sitting in the background, swirling around, and just added that texture.
I use lots of filters in the background. Right. Filter sounds in and out, just as tiny adjustments on the filter cutoff, just to keep, and lots of delay and reverb on there as well. I really love the Sound Toys crystallizer. Actually, it's very nice for doing subtle atmospheric. When you add it on a sound, you can get very nice results on it. And so are you kind of just maybe having an LFO or a bit of automation, just opening up opening up a cutoff filter? And what's the source material for that stuff? Is it synths, or is it samples, or is it just weird sounds you're grabbing? It's both. I actually use when I use samples, I go to and search for samples for some nature sounds or anything that I can blend in. I use freesounds.org.
Yeah.
A lot, actually, to search for sounds, all kinds of sounds.
And there you're going to look at sort of just natural things are just that are not synthesized. Cool. What's one track that stands out for me on the collection is Seeker, and that sort of plucky riff. Mm-hmm. What made that?
Let me see now. It's Live's own operator, actually.
Is that right?
Yeah.
It's kind of, because it actually doesn't sound like an FM synth. It sounds
but it's quite heavily EQ'd and stuff, and effected.
And would operator feature a lot in your productions?
Yes, everything from bass lines, depending a bit though, of course, but I use it a lot, actually.
Well, I suppose it takes us on to what would be your go-to synth then?
Operator.
What about you? Are you a fan of Massive or anything like that, or?
Excuse me, fan of
like Massive or Silent?
Massive. I use FM8. Yeah. I like lots of FM sounds, actually.
Let's talk about your bottom end. I mean, you offer mastering as a solution. What key thing do you do to get your really tight, solid bottom end?
Well, it's all in the mix, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just make sure. I speak regarding my productions. I make sure the kick and bass line fits together well, and I think that's the thing that makes a good bottom end. You have the really low end from the kick and a nice bit higher lows from the bass line, and if those works together well, then it's well, you have a nice bottom end, I think.
So when you're starting a track, do you start with kick and bass line and just work and work?
It's basically all the time, yeah.
And that would be a sample kick and a copy of operator, is that right?
No, for example, yeah.
Well, any other synths that you particularly like using?
There's an old one called Vember Audio Surge that I use quite a lot. Then I use, let me see now.
Sorry, what was that called again?
Vember Audio.
Vember, right? Okay.
Audio Surge.
Right.
Is the synthesizer called?
And is it subtractive or FM?
It's everything actually.
Everything.
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
Subtractive and FM. Yeah, both actually.
And
it's interesting. You can have wavetables and everything in it. It's not being like supported anymore. It's not being updated anymore. But I still use it a lot.
It sounds good. I've never heard of this synth. Must go.
Oh, yeah.
I love. This is what I also do these for. Is I love finding out these sort of secret weapons that you don't think of. So I take it you don't use all the big common synths that everybody else uses then?
No, not really.
No.
I don't know what is like the common and but yeah.
Yeah.
No.
You like sort of obscure. What about you mentioned? Let's talk about mix plugins. You use Sound Toys, which you mentioned. Any other sort of secret weapons in the Cid Inc arsenal?
Let me see now. Well, it's mostly the plugins from Live.
So
the native, yeah.
The native plugins that you always go to. That's
and I really like the filter plugin as well on the new one on 9.6.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Okay, let's move over to you are a mastering engineer as well. You have your mastering side of the business.
Mm-hmm.
What's the most common problem that you encounter when you're getting tracks in that you would love everybody to stop doing?
The clashing like frequencies for bass and bass line to get the good like a good low end bottom end.
Yeah.
So and the lot maybe lots of producers have too much low end in their mixes actually, but I think it's of course depending on the environment they're mixing the tracks. Many people mix tracks in headphones, for example, and you can hear it straight away.
And so again, with this small near field monitors that may not be producing too much bottom end, that do you find that the bottom end is always the most problematic when you're getting stuff in?
Yeah, or the other thing is too little low end as well. So I don't know, maybe some people use speakers or something that brings out way too much of the low end. Mm-hmm. But usually it's too much of the low end.
And what tools do you use for mastering? Then do you know in a mastering suite how do you polish your sound? What would be your chain?
Depends a bit, but I use a hybrid setup. It's with the API 2500 compressor and then SPL Pass EQ, and then usually it's a liner phase EQ as a plugin format. But the chain depends in what order and how depends a bit. But that's usually what I need, and then I use a limiter. And that's about it, actually.
Yeah, I mean, you do, and again, as we always say to people here, it's literally, small increments. It's not, it's little tiny lifts here and a little compression here. It's not big skips. Yeah. What advice would you give to people preparing their tracks for mastering? A lot of guys don't kind of, if their stuff is to go off to a mastering engineer, they go, well, how do I do this? They've built the track with mastering in place, if you know what I mean. So and then they have to take it all off and it just sounds rubbish. So what would be your tips and advice there?
I think try to avoid using anything on the master channel when you mix the track, because it's a good to test maybe a limiter once in a while things, but try to do as good mixes as possible without like anything on the master channel, because then it will be easier for the producer and it will be easier for the master engineer to because the mix will be sounding tight, even though there's nothing on the master channel. Like,
it sounds to me like you're an engineer, a mixer that is very methodical and very sparing with plugins. You don't use a load of plugins for things and processing. So I think, and it's one thing that we always try and get across here, is get your source material right.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that, if it's a lot of people try and process to where they want to be rather than program where they want to be. So any tips on how to sound design better?
Excuse me?
How to design your sounds better?
I think just try to make sure that not too many sounds anyway uses the same frequency range, for example. And if you find a good, for example, synth sound, and it's hard to find a good synth sound that sits directly in the mix. So try to maybe tweak it a bit, but don't use I don't personally like using EQ too much. So I try to get the source sound from the plugin or whatever, as good as possible.
I think that's a huge tip, and I saw something over the weekend. A lot of producers now are obsessed with layering and layering and layering and layering. And 10 years ago we didn't do any layering, because we just didn't have the synths or the processing power, and we still could get big fat sounds. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about your productions is there's no real big riffs and there's no chord changes.
No.
But to me that's really clever then, to hold your attention for that 6, 7, 8 minutes. How do you approach that? How do you approach that not to become boring and sort of when you don't have the big breakdown and big riff?
Well, it's trying to keep things moving slowly, but small adjustments, and just to keep it interesting, and have the atmospheres in background, something going on in the background that is, you can notice it, but you still can't put a finger on it. Yeah. So I think that's the main thing. I like hypnotic things. I like things when they are chugging along the same thing but small change. Yeah.
That's what I got hooked me in. Do you ever get tempted to get 4 minutes into one track ever and just go dun, 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 and just do big massive chords?
Well, sometimes. I've tried, but it doesn't work for me.
Okay. Just to blow people's heads, just to blow. Let's talk about your label, Replugged. As a label owner, what's it like out there at the moment? I can't imagine how you get tracks out there with Beatport, up in limbo and stuff. What do you think the future holds? What's the next sort of 2-3 years as putting records out? Where do you think it is going?
I'm not sure really. It's I think it will maybe going into the to streaming things, getting royalties from there. And like SoundCloud now introduced the new one, the Go, I think it was called. But it's hard to make money, really hard to make money from running a label. Very hard.
I mean, can you make any money from running a label, or is it
not really? No. It's a showcasing, basically.
It's kind of just adding another string to your bow and keeping your name out there, and it's just one other thing you have to do. It's like radio shows now and labels and stuff
and everything.
Yeah. So, do you worry about the future of dance music? Is it just this, put stuff out, people stream it, and then it goes away, or how do you worry about that, or do you just focus in making music and what happens?
I don't think that much of the future. I think I have a motto that says that everything will work out eventually, even though things might go a bit wrong in the dance music scene, but I don't care that much about it, how it will. I think it will go just fine in the future as well.
And You're out DJing quite a bit. You know, we've tried to arrange this interview a couple of times, and you're DJing a lot. Is that something that's growing exponentially for you? That's getting bigger and bigger.
For me?
Yeah.
Yes, for sure. I'm getting more and more gigs actually all the time, so which is good. But I think it's been a hard work. It's been really hard work. Like it's never been easy, and will never be easy. I mean, it's since I started my solo project, it's been like Cid Inc. Like from 2008. It's been hard work to get to the point where I'm now, and I'm not even close to where I want to be. So I still have lots to do. Yeah.
And do you ever think of relocating to, say, LA, London, or Amsterdam, somewhere a bit more sort of dance music centric and making more contacts?
Not really. I think, well, we've been thinking of maybe moving somewhere abroad at some point, but I don't think it's necessary at like this time, because it's easy to keep in contact with people on online. So yeah, and I think it's enough to go to Amsterdam Dance Event every once a year. So
that keeps you happy. You don't fancy moving somewhere a bit warmer? Tell me that. What about then the one thing that always again fascinates me is trying to keep the DJ schedule and the tour schedule, or the studio schedule, going concurrently, plus some sort of family life. Is that something you struggle to do, or can work out quite easily?
It's hard. I mean, when traveling a lot, it's hard to, of course, be in the studio and work on new music, because for me it takes a bit time. I need to be a few days in the studio to get the flow going on.
Yeah.
So that can be a bit hard. And of course, I mean, when mastering, doing lots of masterings, for example, I can be quite tired at the end of the day and maybe not have any feel for producing any music anymore, even though I try every day. But because you listen to so much music every day, so it can be hard. But I mean, yeah, it's hard. And family, I don't have any kids yet, so yeah,
so you're okay.
It's not always easy, but yeah. Could be worse.
And do you keep like a strict studio schedule? Do you try and do like 9 to 5, or are you a guy that works in late into the night and works better at night? Or
I work better during the day, so I try to wake up a decent time and go to the studio and like work until, but I can work until maybe 7-8 in the evening, so it's usually maybe 10 hours, something like that.
No problem. Well, Henri, thank you so much for joining us today on Sonic Academy. I think everybody go on to Spotify, go and check out Cid Inc Collection Volume 2, and there's a huge body of work there, and I think you'll find the production is just some of the best that you'll hear in that progressive house, not the US progressive house, the proper old school John Digweed, Sasha type progressive house. Henri, thank you so much for joining us on Sonic Academy.
Thank you very much. It was a big pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Guys, thank you, Henri, for joining us. Go and check out the interview. Will be coming up on the site soon, and then over to YouTube. And we'll see you all very, very soon. Bye.